Hi Reader Props, welcome to what I read in May. I read 6 books this month, which is actually great, but for most of the month I had only read 2 until I filmed my reading only romance books for a week on my main channel, which is what all of these books are behind me. It was also a strange month in that even though I didn't read that much at first, the first 3 books that I read were all 5 stars, which I don't think has ever happened to me in my entire life. So this will be an interesting wrap up. Starting with The Ministry of Time by Kaylee Ann Bradley. This is a copy that they sent me actually because I was reading the Book of the Month copy, and the one that's not from Book of the Month looks more glossy and shiny, and she signed the inside of it. It's so cute. She drew a chicken bag, which if you read a book, you know what chicken bag is. I love this book so much. My other copy has all of my annotations in it, but this was the most unexpected 5-star read I could have ever picked up, and it's like really a 5-star read. Like sometimes I give books 5 stars because I am craving that they should be one because I haven't read a really good book in a long time, but this one was like, no, I was not well after reading this book. I read it in this vlog. If you want to see my actual reaction, I was crying. It was kind of embarrassing and I kept it in, but you can see how distraught I am in that video. Something about this book made me not okay. And I think it's interesting to talk about this book this way because I don't think everyone will experience it in that way. I don't even think you get the main girl's name for a really long time, or not really ever. The plot of this book is that she is signing up to help refugees get more accommodated to their lifestyle. Except these refugees are from history because the British government has figured out time travel. So she's going to help this naval officer from the 1800s get accommodated to the 21st century, and all of her other colleagues are taking care of other people from like the 1600s or the 1500s, all of these different things, and you have to live with that person to help them get settled into their new life. It's like a forced proximity romance trope, except it's not written like a romance book at all. It's written like a literary fiction sci-fi book, which is why it's so difficult to explain and difficult to recommend. It just stands in its own category in my opinion. But the reason I had such an emotional reaction to this book is because she weaves in a lot of topics underneath the plot, and she leaves it very open-ended, and it almost sneaks up on you because I didn't realize that there were any themes like this until I was almost finished with the book, and I was like, wait a second, she's kind of been trying to tell me something this entire time with topics of grief, of having parents who are immigrants. She actually personally is Cambodian, I believe. Yeah, British Cambodian, but looks mostly white, and that's cool because like that's what her character in the book is, but that's also what she is in real life. So she talks about that a little bit, which I can kind of relate to in a way. And I don't know, just her writing in general was very poetic and beautiful, genius level in my opinion. So there was just not a single thing that I disliked about this book. There's also really fun plot twists and a plot to follow, but it does take time to get into it. So I would give yourself like 80 pages before considering that it's not the book for you, because you need to commit some time to letting the author do her job. And if you do, I feel like it could be a really great book for a lot of people. So absolute amazing, 5 stars. Probably gonna be one of my favorite books of the entire year. Honestly, I would love to reread this probably next year. There's my first book. Next up, I read Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. This kind of being sci-fi, I think inspired me to continue my other sci-fi journey, which is the Red Rising series. I've read the first 3 books of that series, and then it continues for 4 more books, but he kind of markets it as like a original trilogy and then the rest of the series, which he did because he knows people won't read the series if it's not completed yet. So he started calling it an original trilogy and then the other 4 books, but it is actually pretty different in a way because this is the 4th book in that series, and it's the first time that you get multiple perspectives. So you're following a bunch of different storylines and you're in different people's heads. I mean, literally just explaining what a POV is. But the series gets way darker after the first 3 books and way more graphic and gruesome. It was a little bit shocking, and then I weirdly got used to it. And I don't really know what this means. I should probably look it up, but I've heard it described as more grimdark. Let me look up what that means. Grimdark fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy that is characterized by a dark, gritty, and often cynical view of the world. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I would have been able to get through this book unless I did a buddy read, which I did mine with Ashlyn. She has a great YouTube channel that you should subscribe to. Having someone to text and be like, who is this character? Do you remember who they are? Was so helpful, and just knowing that someone else was reading the book and waiting for me to catch up forced me to get through the fear of this huge world. It just gets so expansive by book 4, and it becomes actually kind of difficult, at least for my brain who does not read sci-fi like this. I would say the first 2 books are so easy and this should not scare you at all, but if you take a really large gap in between those books and then this one, you might just struggle a little bit. I would recommend reading them all back to back to back, but I still think think this book was amazing, and the characters just feel so nostalgic to me, like the world that he's built. It actually does feel like coming home whenever I get to read about Darrow, which you don't even get to see that much of in this book. You meet some new characters in here. This is 5 stars. I just feel like really nothing in this series could make me give it less than a 5-star rating. Next up, we have a reread, which I'm proud of myself for because I feel like I always say, I cannot wait to reread this Emily Henry book, and then I never do it. So I did it with Happy Place because the paperback came out and I never owned it. And I feel like if you buy a different version of a book that you already own, it's a good reason to just reread it. And tab it, highlight it, underline it. To be honest, was personally researching her writing for inspiration for my writing. So that was really fun. I feel like this book is funny because it's the most summery, happy looking one that she's ever published. And it actually is, in my opinion, the saddest one. I was gonna talk about what a character struggles with, but I feel like that is kind of a spoiler. I feel like everyone knows what this book is about, so me talking about it probably won't be anything new. But I do think her writing style changes a lot when she writes this one. And I actually feel like in Funny Story, which is her newer book, she goes back a little bit to her, not old writing style, but this one has a lot of adjectives and descriptive words at the beginning, and that felt like a very big upgrade from previous writing. And then I feel like in Funny Story, she's less flowery and descriptive with the setting and like the summery vibes, and it's more just going back to funny scenarios and banter, which I really liked. So in my head, this one is the most atmospheric summery vibe, but it's also the most sad because you're reading a lot of flashbacks, and especially the part where she's meeting Wynn's family, I started to get a little bit bored, which I don't even remember the first time. So yeah, that's why rereading is really fun, because I feel like you just have a completely different experience and it really solidifies your memory of the book, especially if you read a lot. It's just nice to go back and really, really, really remember and see new things that you forgot were even there the first time because you were so excited that it was a new book that you read it in 2 days and kind of were not okay the entire time. So yeah, 5 stars still. Nothing Emily could make it a not 5 stars. Well, that's not true. That's objectively not true. I'm still honest when I rate her books, but it's very hard for me to be, like, her writing alone will make things a 5-star. And then I read This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. I absolutely love her covers. Like, they look like watercolor pieces of art. And I was so nervous going into this book. Like, I kept picking it up, and then I just was so over analyzing everything that after every chapter, I would put it down and be like, no, I can't read this. It might be a 2-star. I shouldn't waste my time. These are all... Look who I found. Why go to sleep right there, buddy. Back in the day, I guess I tabbed up Every Summer After, but I didn't underline, so I have no idea what I was tabbing. That's awesome. It's actually crazy that Every Summer After was her first book. It low-key was really good, even though it was a crazy ending. So at the time I was like, oh, 5 stars, I will overlook that. Now thinking about it, she didn't have to write the conflict like that. So I made it 3 stars. And then her second book, The Next Summer, her writing is still great. There's something about it that I really like, but towards the end, when the romance was supposed to be happening, I just couldn't connect them at all. So I gave this one 2 stars. So I just was so nervous for so long for no reason reading this book, because I think I do really enjoy her writing for whatever reason. This one is set on Prince Edward Island, and it starts off in the prologue with her arriving at the island. She goes to a bar to eat some food, and her friend is supposed to show up, but she doesn't. And she ends up talking to the bartender, going home with him that night. They spend the night together, and then she realizes that was her best friend's brother. So then we're 5 years in the present, and her friend's about to get married. There's a conflict going on there where her friend's like, hey, can you just drop everything that you're doing in Canada and fly to Prince Edward Island with me and spend some time with me? She stops talking about the wedding. Things are kind of strange. Also, her brother is there, and her number 1 rule is don't fall in love with my brother. It's a very fun time with the drama, and the stakes are high, and it's kind of angsty. I did honestly like a lot of the aspects of this book, but I just feel like I never personally relate to her characters. Like, there's something about the vibe of all of her main characters, I think, with the way that they think, that I don't connect with, so that's always a little bit of a disconnect, but I gave it 3.5 stars. I feel like it's a great summer book, honestly, and if you've read her books in the past, I think you'll still really like this one, and I definitely will probably buy her next book, so Oh, this one's kind of sad. Next, I read Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher, which I was really excited to read. A lot of people love her. She's the one who wrote The Fine Print, which was one of TikTok's biggest selling romance books, and she always writes about billionaires. That was her first series. I think it was a trilogy. It was about billionaires. This is her new series, and this one is about lakefront billionaires. Basically, Julian and Dahlia both can renovate houses. Dahlia was on a fixer-upper type show, and she was engaged to this guy, in a relationship with him for 9 years, and then that ends, and his family is the one who produced the show, so she loses her fiance and her TV show within one day, and she moves back home. And then Julian, who lives in the hometown, who has history with Dahlia because they went to Stanford together, is there. They run into each other because of a silly little event, and things just go from there. What do I even say about this book? This book was not for me for whatever reason. What is the reason? I need to describe it to you. I think the biggest thing is that Julian in this book is just not my type of romance character that I like at all. And the writing also did nothing for me. I think I do like poetic writing, and this is very just tell you what's going on type of thing. And I think her books are more for the fun scenarios that the characters get put into, but I didn't feel connected to the characters, so I just didn't care. Whereas in like the Addicted series, which I feel like is a similar series, indie romance, they're just doing a bunch of nothing all the time, but I felt so connected to those characters. They felt like real people to me, that it felt like I was just hanging out with those people. And I think that's the vibe of this author's work as well. So if you like the characters, you'll love it. And I just happened to not connect to them, so I didn't like this book at all. And I gave it 2.5 stars. It's also 519 pages. And then I read The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren, which I was so excited for. I feel like this cover, you want to read that in the summer, and I feel like I trust them as authors. This was their 30th book, actually. So I read the inside cover and was so confused. Basically, Anna is an artist for a living, and she's struggling to pay her bills, and her father is sick, so she also needs to pay for his bills. She's struggling a little bit, a bit. And then we have Liam, who's a professor at Stanford. And at one point in time, these two people got married so that she could get housing on campus. That part doesn't really, I don't get it. It's just part of the plot. You just have to go with it. They got married, and then she thought that she like signed divorce papers and he moved out. Their agreement was done. But Liam comes from another billionaire trope, a billionaire family, and in order to get his inheritance, he needs to be married for 5 years. And his sister is getting married on a private island, and he needs to look married because if the marriage looks fake, then you can't get your inheritance. So he comes back to Anna and is like, hey, I actually really need you to come be my fake wife on this private island with me in front of my family. They're really obnoxious. You're gonna have to act rich. You're gonna have to act like you've known me for the 5 years that we were supposed to have been married. So do you want in? And then the story goes from there. And I feel like that's just such a fun plot, and it was just as fun as it sounds. It was funny. It was spicier than normal. Same with this book, and honestly this book. I also read this book really fast, which if you can tell by the theme of this month, you probably actually can't tell because 6 is a good number for the month, but I didn't read for like 3 weeks, and then in the last week I was like, I need to get a main channel video out. I'm gonna read all these books in 1 week. But up until then, reading in a fast manner was very difficult for me, but this book made it really easy. So I highly recommend, if you want to go to the pool, go to the beach, you should pick up this book. It was so fun, and I honestly couldn't think of anything that I really thought was wrong with it or that annoyed me. And it's a mostly very happy book. Like nothing caused any real life, well, one of the parts was a little bit sad. It's just a good summer vibe. Like you're not gonna get really emotional during this, and it's gonna be really entertaining and fun. So I gave this 4.5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in May. If you should read anything that I read from this month, I would highly recommend The Ministry of Time if you like literary fiction and sci-fi. I don't even typically like literary fiction that much, but if you like sci-fi with really poetic writing, I would highly recommend this book. And then if you just want something fun, probably one of these. Let me know what I should read. And until next time, I will see you somewhere else on the internet. Bye!